Hello everyone. So I felt the need to make another video to address the um, updates to the situation in Syria. Trump sends out these tweets in response to what is alleged to be a Syrian gas attack, which was done supposedly by Assad. We'll get into that in a second. So I just want to set the stage for everyone here. The tweet that was sent out recently from President Trump says Russia vows to shoot down any and all missiles fired at Syria. Get ready, Russia, because they will be coming. Nice and new and smart in quotation marks with an exclamation point. You shouldn't be partners with a gas killing animal who kills his people and enjoys it. Okay. So this is really kind of a flashback, actually, because there was a similar situation going on exactly a year ago, pretty much. In April of last year, there was a alleged gas attack against Assad. It was alleged that Assad did it, and pretty much um, Trump responded by bombing a Russian air base that was in Syria, and it was deemed a pretty big escalation at the time. Um, Things more or less remained stagnant, though. So this seems kind of to be a repeat of that, and as it turns out, just like last time, a lot of people in the establishment Democrat circles, they ended up pretty much supporting that action that Trump took. Chuck Schumer, in particular, said, yeah, it was great, very good, but we didn't have a strategy, so that's not good. So, yeah, that's the big complaint in Democratic circles, pretty much. It's like, yeah, you can bomb Syria, you can bomb Russia, whatever, I don't care, but I want a real strategy in terms of taking them down. Um, I'll probably address these things multiple times throughout this video, but I'll just say right out the bat, like, if you're on the left and that's where your criticism is, and you're like, oh, it's fine if we do military action, but we want a strategy. You're not going to get a strategy from from this administration, not from the neocons that Trump is surrounding himself with. It's going to be all just indiscriminate bombing, killing of civilians. These people talk about like pinprick attacks and drone strikes and all this. Like, you're gonna create more terrorism, guaranteed, by killing more civilians, and it's just wrong that we're killing civilians, and we know that we are. We have the data to recognize this, but there's no leadership right now that cares about that. I mean, you thought it was bad under Obama when these programs were basically being expanded, the drone program, but now this is the real deal with people in the right that just really don't give a damn. Um, but this is interesting though. 5 years ago, Trump had this to say about bombing Syria. So this was in 2013, and he's, of course, addressing this to Obama. And it was a series of tweets. There's probably more than just these, but I'll read these 4 tweets. We should not attack Syria, but if they make the stupid move to do so, the Arab League, whose members are laughing at us, should pay. The only reason President Obama wants to attack Syria is to save face over his very dumb red line statement. Do not attack Syria. Fix USA. That kind of gets to a sentiment that Trump ran on, basically like get out of the overseas wars and invest your money domestically. President Obama do not attack Syria. There is no upside and tremendous downside. Save your powder, in quotation marks, for another and more important day. Again, to our very foolish leader, do not attack Syria. If you do, many very bad things will happen, And from that fight, the U.S. gets nothing. These tweets, oh my god, like Trump, I guess he's really kind of reeled it in and like made it less like he's like a freaking teenager, like having a hissy fit. Like that last one I just read was all in caps, but he's kind of made it a little bit like he's, but still not even because there's these weird capitalization things. But whatever, I don't care about that. The appearance of things like that. A lot of other people on the left like to go after like the appearance, but so look, I'll address this whole like alleged thing with the Syrian gas attack. So last year when it happened, the evidence that came out was very questionable, and there was honestly kind of more evidence that the rebels were the cause of the gas attack. Something people don't like to talk about is that Assad, according to the historical record here, has given up his chemical weapons. There was this big incident where John Kerry was having a meeting with like a Russian diplomat, and he was like, well, what could we do to basically get Assad on our side, or something like that. Or I'm sorry, the Russian diplomat was addressing that to Kerry, and then Kerry's like, well, he could give up all his chemical weapons, but he's not going to do that. And then the next day, Assad gave up his chemical weapons. And then people will start to make the claim like, oh, well, he's probably just lying. He has chemical weapons, hidden away somewhere. But it's just hard to verify these things. And a lot of the times, because people on the ground, I really feel like are going to have their own agenda. I mean, it's totally understandable in my view. Like if you're in Syria and Assad is a really oppressive regime, you really do want to see him leave, but at the same time, at what cost? So people might lie, I feel like, to to have that outcome come to fruition. Now I don't know that, so I have to wait and see what the evidence says. But I'm not gonna take the evidence of just like people's word, like, oh, they saw helicopters dropping barrels and stuff. Like, you need evidence, because people's word may not be reliable. It may not in this case. Yeah, and of course, like I said earlier, Assad's not a good guy. So we need to look at getting him out of power. But I disagree that the way we should do it is militarily. If you were going to go down that path, you need to do it in an international fashion through the UN, and the US cannot be the sole party involved in this. We can't just unilaterally decide to attack Syria. By any really stretch of the legal imagination, we can't be doing this. I mean, it's bad enough as it is with the drone strikes, but now we're just talking about basically a ground invasion. So this is not a pretty sight, not at all. And sadly, the mainstream left is part of the pro-war effort, and the ideas coming out that they end up agreeing with Trump in like the weirdest ways. And there's plenty of examples, because I went and looked to see examples of people on the left supporting what Trump is doing in Syria, and it's not hard. Look, like I just said, Chuck Schumer supported it a year ago, and so you want recent examples? In the New York Times, they did a piece, and this is someone, I'm going to butcher the name, but Michelle A. Flournoy, and she was the Undersecretary of Defense under President Obama. And she's talking about this contemporarily, about what Trump is doing now. There's a tension between the desire to do something bigger than the last time and the president's clear desire not to stay engaged in sustained operations. Conceivably, they could design a larger one-off strike or a series of smaller strikes. But at the end of the day, it's sustained pressure on Assad, and that's going to change his calculation about whether to use chemical weapons. Okay. Now, like I say, we have to verify whether Assad was the source of that. But, again, this is the main strategy that's being put forward, or like the main idea, I should say, that we should be involved militarily and doing something. It's like a larger one-off strike or a series of smaller ones. It's like basically a matter of degrees, but the implication is the U.S. has to be involved militarily, and that's always, it's in both parties now. That's the point that we're at. There's no anti-war party anymore. Like people talk about how, oh yeah, the Democrats are so left. That's complete BS. A complete fabrication made by right-wing media. I mean, among other people. So more examples. In The Nation, I think this was a more recent quote from Chuck Schumer, said we should toughen up our policies on Russia. Joe Biden says we have to fight back against Russian subversion. Excuse me. And this is a quote from the article. The New York Times, again, the New York Times always like supposedly the liberal outlet for, it's like practically like communist in terms of like a lot of conservatives' mind, but it's so ridiculous. People's spectrums are so far to the right in this country. So anyways, according to the New York Times editorial board, the United States' recent closure of a Russian consulate and expulsion of 60 Russian officials offers some hope that Trump may finally be forced to deal with the threat that Putin poses to the United States and its Western allies. Though, to be sure, Mr. Trump will have to go even further to push back effectively against Mr. Putin's mischief. They just like to use these like little catchwords or phrases, and they characterize certain things like Putin's mischief. Like, what is that? That's ridiculous. You're not even being specific about what he's doing. And, I mean, come on, but I'm not buying it. Like, you're going to expel 60 Russian officials, and that's going to do what exactly in your mind? That solves what problem? They're like, oh, yeah, we don't like Russia. That we're sending a message to them. You're not doing anything. Like, come on. NPR talked to Tim Kaine, and this is his quote here. He launched military strikes, talking about Trump here. He launched military strikes against Syria about a year ago. I think there's a good argument to be made that there should be a military tough response to using chemical weapons against civilians, but that's not something that the president can just do on his own. He is required to come to Congress and seek congressional approval for it. And I think we need to make sure that he does. Like, I can't believe, I really can't believe that people in the Democratic Party are saying this. That, like, yeah, Trump, he should just come to Congress and declare war. And it's because, yeah, like I alluded to earlier, like, you can't just go into Syria under the current authorization, which was, goes back to the war in Iraq. But I mean, we've already been doing it. It's kind of weird how these little mind games work. It's because basically we didn't have a ground invasion, but we also sent special ops, I'm pretty sure, to Syria. But anyways, the thinking goes, the current authorization of war from the war in Iraq, you can't justify going into Syria because of that. So you have to go to Congress again. And the Democrats, in this case, Tim Kaine, who was the vice president on the Democratic ticket with Hillary, is saying, yeah, we should encourage Trump to basically ask us to authorize going to war. Absolute ridiculousness. Oh my gosh. This neoliberal curse has made me unable to talk. I'm speechless. Okay. So now, let's go to The Intercept. they had an article that came out, Glenn Greenwald and Zaid Jalani. Pretty good article. So I want to read just like the beginning of it and then like maybe little bits of it at the end. But okay, so the civil war in Syria began in 2011 and escalated for 5 years during the Obama presidency. Yet Barack Obama, despite demands from leaders of both parties and think tanks across the spectrum, never once bombed Syrian government targets. Although the CIA under Obama spent $1 billion per year to covertly train and fund Bashar al-Assad's enemies, it was never close to enough to topple him, just enough to keep the war going. But Obama never bombed Assad or his military assets, a decision which, to this day, is scorned across official Washington. Hillary Clinton blasted Obama's refusal to do more to stop Assad, and in 2017 she actively encouraged Donald Trump to bomb Assad and take out his air force. And that's another example. She ran for president. She ran against Trump and is like, yeah, I agree with what he did. She said I would have done that. I would have bombed Syria a year ago. Unbelievable. To this day, Obama regards his refusal to bomb Assad as one of his best moments. About this, Obama told The Atlantic in 2016, "I'm very proud of this moment. He made the decision because he was tired of watching Washington unthinkingly drift toward war in Muslim countries, and because he was wary of military confrontation with a regime that is sponsored by two large states, Russia and Iran." So this actually gets to an important point here. What's going on in Syria is kind of what is called a proxy war. So Russia is allies with Syria, and our involvement in Syria is escalating tensions with us and Russia to the point where it almost is kind of like the makings of a World War III type situation. And it's like I don't think it's beyond the point of hope yet, but it's certainly it's not good to see these signs because the Democrats again are going to the right, and they aren't resisting Trump in the right ways. That they're insisting that he become more hawkish, and he has. Like look at with Ukraine. So Obama, he sought to basically have an alignment with Russia on fighting ISIS. So he wanted a military partnership, and at the same time, Russia annexed Crimea, and that was bad. And a lot of Republicans and Democrats wanted Obama to arm Ukraine, and he refused to. And now Trump is doing just that. He's arming groups that actually are, some of them are neo-Nazis fighting people in Russia. And just another quick example of someone on the left who's agreeing with Trump in terms of this Syria situation. So former Secretary of State Madeleine Albright under Bill Clinton commends President Trump for recognizing that Putin is not a friend, but says that the U.S. needs a strategy for Syria. As far as I can tell, there is no strategy. So again, this is the same line of thinking that Chuck Schumer said, like, oh, there's no strategy, I have no idea what we're doing, but we're bombing Syria, good job. So it's Mick resistance, and I'm really sick of people that want to paint the Democratic establishment as like the true embodiment of the left, and they're so liberal. This is so not true, and it's not just foreign policy. We're just focusing on that for this video, but on economics, they're also deregulating Wall Street, and they don't fight for important economic issues like Medicare for all. So this is a problem with the Democrats, and I really am worried that they think they have it in the bag for midterms, but I have not seen that they put forth the effort to have a strong left party, and that's what's needed to remedy the situation. So, enough on that topic. We'll close out with 3 other things I want to talk about. Rachel Maddow is a host who's on MSNBC, and she's been on for a number of years now. she was viewed as kind of, more progressive, pretty much under the Obama years. And I had seen older videos of her, and I kind of liked her stuff. It seemed good, but she's since basically, like, she became full on Hill bot supporter, and ridiculously so. The real turn probably was just when Trump pretty much became president, and she was, she's still at the forefront of this RussiaGate hysteria, and has made ridiculous claims like, oh, if Trump removes the troops on the Russian border, the NATO border, then if he removes those troops, then that means that he's Putin's puppet. That the PP tape is real. Um, and a lot of this stuff, it's just sensationalism, and it's trumped up, pun intended, stuff. But look, it's like I don't even have to make fun of her. It's like the stuff writes itself. Like when she was like all going crazy about Trump's tax returns, she like built it up for like 25 minutes that she had Trump's tax returns, and then when she finally said it at the very end of her little segment, um, it turned out like it was like old tax returns, and like it actually kind of like made him look like a good businessman, pretty much. So it just like completely fell flat. But okay, so this is an important issue for me because now she's number one in the news. For the longest time, Bill O'Reilly, believe it or not, was like number one in the news, but he's off the air now, and so Rachel Maddow is beating out all pretty much all the big Fox News hosts, which is crazy. Um, it's pretty bad, I would say, for the country because it reminds me of the build up to the war in Iraq. I mean, like this is the narrative that's in the minds of a lot of American people now. This Russia hysteria, like, oh, like Trump is like this Manchurian candidate for Putin, and he's gonna act against our best interests in favor of Putin. Again, that has not come to fruition. In fact, he's acted against Putin. Trump has. So, when you have a population that is constantly being fed this speculative thinking by Rachel Maddow, it will ease the idea of creating a broader conflict, and that's what I'm really scared of here. And it's the selective memory too, which brings me to Mark Zuckerberg here, who testified before Congress, about people's privacy on social media, all that, and people were acting like, it's like before people like you, Mark Zuckerberg, and doing what you were doing, relatively recently, I guess, because they changed certain things about their business, Facebook. But like because of you, we may not have any privacy. But the NSA has been collecting people's metadata. I don't even know exactly how long, but we found out about it in 2014 with Edward Snowden. And these things are used against people. They're used against protesters that want to speak out against the government and draw attention to the atrocities that they commit. And then just the powerful will come cracking down on you. That's how it ends up happening because they view it as a national security interest, like with Chelsea Manning when she released the video to WikiLeaks that exposed American soldiers shooting, innocent people, journalists. It was like they used that video as like propaganda for terrorism, so therefore Chelsea Manning is a traitor. But you just twisted your own logic. It's like, what's not going to be propaganda for the terrorist if you don't kill innocent people. That's going to solve the problem right out. It's like you're really like killing the messenger there. Just absolutely absurd. So I just wanted to touch on that, like the selective memory aspect, because people forget that it was a big story when the NSA collects all the metadata, stores it in a place in Utah or somewhere, and it's used against even Muslim men. If you're a young Muslim man, you've guaranteed been spied on by the NSA, and I'm sorry, in unjust ways, like far beyond what should be allowed, in my view. I mean, at least in the constitutional view, because you need a warrant to search people's private belongings, and certainly I would say the contents of your phone and your laptop, like these are things that are so within such easy access to people, that we have things like LoveInt, where people that are in intelligence communities, they basically spy on their ex-lovers, and that's not right, and that should be um, crimes that are looked into. I'm sure it must go far beyond that. So um, last thing is the Israel-Palestine conflict, which obviously is not a new thing, but is escalating as of late. We have 30 Palestinians killed, and a lot of protesters and just innocent people, because we see video of people that aren't doing anything, people that are literally praying in the middle of the desert, and they're sniped from afar by the IDF. Other examples of like a couple with like a baby, and the IDF threw a stun grenade at them. I mean, like, you could have really hurt that baby. I think they ended up getting away in that case, if I'm not mistaken. But you could have really hurt someone, and they have hurt so many. They've killed 30 people, and what happens in the mainstream press here? You get no coverage of that. It's like, and the coverage that you would get from it, it's basically all in support of Israel, and they have done nothing wrong. They sent out a tweet, the IDF, basically saying, like, we know where every bullet went, like we were so precise. Well, if that was true, then I guess you committed murder then. And recently, 7 protesters were arrested outside Chuck Schumer's office. They were Jewish activists that wanted to point out the atrocities committed by Israel, and they were saying, like, how many more lives killed in Gaza before Chuck Schumer breaks his silence, because he's always been a ardent supporter of Israel. And it was just really scary Orwellian stuff. Like look at the video on there. You see a girl getting arrested by the cops, and there's this weird robotic voice. It's like, please disperse, you're unlawfully blocking foot traffic. It's like, if you leave, you will not be charged. Like, come on. People are there just to raise their voice about an issue. They aren't hurting anyone, like, and you're gonna arrest them? I mean, like, where are all the free speech warriors on the right on this issue? Because what? Suddenly it's okay just to arrest people for protesting. They aren't doing anything. They're just speaking their minds. Free speech in this country means, whether or not you agree with that viewpoint, you'd be all like, oh, like, you might be offending someone, or you're disruptive. Well, politics, in my view, you kind of do have to be disruptive to raise awareness. It's kind of a key component. So you're going to arrest someone if they aren't even committing any crimes. They're just there to raise their voice, and they just try and do these little things, like you're blocking foot traffic. Completely ridiculous. And it really shows that our fundamental rights are more in danger under the right. I mean, like, it seems ridiculous to say that, but the thinking is on the conservative side, like, yeah, the liberals want to take away all your rights and all that stuff, like, but no, we're seeing it happen under Trump. We're seeing things worse than ever in terms of protesting too. I mean, like, ridiculous laws being passed that like you can run over protesters. It's like it's this is real. Like this is actually happening, and you want to straw man the left and say that like, oh yeah, we're actually the ones that are going to go after people for free speech. Ridiculous. There's no mainstream effort to do that. You might have some people with pink hair on college campuses, but I don't care. I care about what is actually being implemented, and the right is doing that.